Hello and welcome, Woodrow Wilson friends, family, and students. This is Miss Fields here, and I'm joining you tonight for our 17th episode of Math Toolbox. Tonight we're going to be focusing on applying the skills that we learned previously in the instructional video on changing mixed numbers into fractions in greater than 1, and we're going to be applying it to the operation of multiplication, specifically with multiplying mixed numbers by whole numbers. As with every other math skill in 5th grade, it's going to be expected that our 5th graders apply this knowledge to some type of context. Like I've said in previous videos, context is key. Math means nothing unless we actually find a way or realize how we're going to use it in real life. So let's see what we're trying to figure out tonight. Miss Spicer has 10 rooms in her mansion. She desperately needs to clean her carpets. She wants to use 3 3/4 quarts of cleaning solution in each room. How many gallons of cleaning solution will she use? So immediately in my brain, I'm looking for the numbers that are relevant to this word problem. I'm seeing 10 rooms is definitely relevant, and also 3 3/4 quarts of cleaning solution are relevant. I'm also thinking about how I can construct my graphic organizer of a foursquare to make sure I set myself up for success. And it should look something like this. With multiplying, we're not going to be using this top right box, so we'll talk about that later. However, we will be using our UKT box to be analyzing our problem, our solving portion, and also our stating solution portion in order to answer our problem. Immediately, I know my two numbers that are relevant are 10 and 3 3/4. Now I need to start analyzing using UKT in order to ensure that I know for sure what operation I'm using. Starting with units, I find my numbers and I look after them. It looks like 10, the unit associated with it is rooms, and 3 3/4, the unit that is associated with it is quarts of cleaning solution. So in the U portion of my UKT, I'm going to be writing rooms and quarts. Now immediately I'm thinking my units don't match. Now if my units don't match, I know 100% that I will not be adding or subtracting, because adding and subtracting requires that the units match in order for that to work. So the two operations that I'm left with are either multiplication or division. Now this is going to require me to look for keywords, and sometimes with our multiplication and division problems, we still don't know what operation we're using after our keyword, so we have to look to the T, which is our total. Let's look through our problem. As I'm scanning through my problem, I'm seeing one of the keywords that I'm seeing is each room. I'm going to use 3 3/4 quarts in each room. Now, my background knowledge tells me each can imply that we're multiplying. It could also imply that we're dividing. So I really need to go on to the last portion of our UKT in order to figure out what operation I'm using. Am I trying to find the total, or do I know the total? Now we're going to find this information is looking at the question that's stated at the end. It asks how many gallons of cleaning solution will she use, she being Miss Spicer. So I'm thinking in my brain, do I know the total of gallons that she's going to be using, or do I need to find it? Now if I know the total, I know I'm dividing. If I need to find the total, I have to multiply. Now I know she uses 3 3/4 quarts on one room, but I don't know how many she's going to need to use in total, so I know that I'm finding the total. That being said, I know that I will be multiplying these two numbers together. Like I said before, finding a common denominator is not necessary when you multiply fractions. So instead of a 4 square, this can technically be considered a 3 square. However, something tricky about multiplying whole numbers by fractions that are mixed, or that are just fractions in general, is that you have to remember that whole numbers can be represented as a fraction by putting the whole number over 1. Now here's the part where using your skills with converting mixed numbers to fractions greater than 1 comes in. You can't multiply this mixed number by 10 over 1 because you have a whole and then you also have a fraction. We want to change this mixed number into a fraction that has just a numerator and a denominator, no wholes. Now in thinking back to our previous instructional video, the quick way to do this is by multiplying the denominator by the whole and then by adding that product to the numerator. 3 times 4 is 12, plus 3 is 15. Our fraction greater than 1 is 15/4. And just to check in and remind you, this 4 comes from the denominator right here. And what I like to do to ensure that I don't forget that that's the denominator is before I even find the numerator portion of my fraction greater than 1, I write down my denominator. Now the next step in a multiplication problem with fractions is that you need to remind yourself that you're multiplying across. Now by across, I mean you're multiplying the numerator by the numerator and the denominator by the denominator. You're not doing any mixed x things, you're not doing any top and bottom multiplying, you're going straight across the top, straight across the bottom. That gives us 10 times 15, which is 150, and that gives us 1 times 4, which is 4. So we get 150/4. Unfortunately, this doesn't really mean much. This is a fraction greater than 1, and if we're thinking about cleaning solution, 150/4 doesn't really tell us how many quarts that Miss Spicer is going to need in order to clean her mansion floors. So we're going to need to use division in order to change this fraction greater than 1 into a mixed number that actually makes sense for the problem. Like I said before, every fraction is a division problem, and that is the numerator getting divided by the denominator. This was previously the fraction greater than 1, 150/4. In thinking about our division process, we know we have 4 steps. Our first step is to divide, then multiply, then subtract and bring down. So we're going to look at this first digit. We know that 0 groups of 4 can be taken away from 1. So we're going to put a 0 in the place value directly above the 1. Next step, we're going to be looking at this number 15. How many groups of 4 can we take away from 15? We know 3 groups of 4 can be taken away from 15 if we divided. Our next step is to multiply. 4 times 3 is 12. Next step is to subtract. 5 minus 2 is 3. 1 minus 1 is 0. And last step is to bring down the remaining numbers in the dividend, which gives us 30. Our last question to ask ourselves is, how many groups of 4 can we take away from 30? I know in my brain, or using a multiplication chart, it doesn't matter, use your resources so that you're accurate. 4 groups can be taken away, 7 groups of 4 can be taken away from 30. That was division. Now we need to multiply. 7 times 4 is 28. Last step is to subtract. Now unfortunately right here, we have a number that's bigger than the top number. We can't subtract 8 from 0, so we're going to need to regroup this 3, change it into a 20, so that 3 becomes a 2. This 0 becomes a 1, which creates 10, and then we're going to subtract from there. 8 minus 10 is 2, and 2 minus 2 is 0. Now this is the trickiest part about making your mixed number. We don't know which one goes on top, which one goes on the bottom. So immediately, what I recommend for my 5th graders to do, once you found your whole, our whole is 37. You are saying in your brain, looking over here at the divisor, our 4 is the denominator. So what I like to do before I even think about this remainder down here is I put down whatever the divisor is as my denominator so I don't forget. Last step, look at your remainder, put it up there in the numerator, and then you've got your mixed number, which is 37 2/4. Now, just for the sake of keeping it simple, I'm not going to simplify this fraction 2/4 into its lesser, or into its smallest form, which would be 1/2, into its simplest form, excuse me. So I'm just going to leave it 37 2/4. However, in future videos, just know that we're going to be simplifying fractions as well. So after I find my quotient, which is my mixed number, I need to go back to the problem because I forgot what we were even answering. Now, if you don't remember what you're answering, you always look to the last section of the word problem to figure out what you're answering. And it says, how many gallons of cleaning solution will she use? Now, the unit associated with the cleaning solution is quarts of cleaning solution. So I know Miss Spicer will use 37 2/4 gallons of cleaning solution to clean the carpets in her mansion. Thank you so much for joining me tonight on Math Toolbox and practicing how to multiply mixed numbers and whole numbers. If changing mixed numbers into fractions greater than 1 or into changing fractions greater than 1 back into mixed numbers is something that's hard for you, please check out the previous video. If not, keep on practicing, and I can't wait to see you in the morning to practice with you as well. Have a great night.